I've got a long and full day planned ahead in getting a bunch of things planted out at our main site in Trumansburg. But before I head up there this morning, I thought I'd wander in the garden and just do a general update of where things are. So stick around. First thing to look at here in my mind is this beautiful apple tree. This is our giant old crab apple. It casts most of the shade that keeps our home cool. And it's in peak flower during the heat of the day. The bees are just ridiculous on there. Such an incredible magnet for them, and it casts enough shade to keep our home cool enough on hot days that we don't even need to run an air conditioner. We haven't set one up we've never set one up. But what's fun is that as the petals finalize, they start dropping in here, those little white flakes, and they'll actually lay down a decent quality mulch in the beds that are right under it. So the sweetness of that apple and what it offers to us, it just keeps on giving. Thanks, apple. It's a lot of work out in the main garden to get things up to speed, but there are a couple of beds that actually feel pretty close to as full as I'd like them to be, at least for the next few months. And I thought it'd be fun to just break down what's happening in some of these beds. The one in front of me, it's a similar pattern to a couple of the beds that are back in this area. This is a nice high fertility, close to the home, easy access area. So I tend to get it pretty dialed in as much as possible. But let's look at, for example, this bed right here. There's a lot going on. I'll take a moment to break down what's happening. So the theme that we've talked about this pretty extensively, is the idea of nursery crops in a relatively large bed. We put the nursery crops in first. In this case, we've got a cultivar, Charlie's Golden Autumn Olive, that we're propagating for in-house use, since we're not allowed to sell these, and that's fine. It's a really amazing golden autumn olive on a beautifully sized shrub. These are cuttings that were on bottom heat this winter, and they calloused and created really nice starts to roots, and it looks like they're going to root out very thoroughly. They're hard to get at, they're deeper into the bed, but we don't have to get there all the time, so that works out really nicely. The lettuces that were transplanted in, with a little bit of weeding to do, but not much, they are a lot more accessible. They're within the first foot or two of the bed, and so we've got them dotted all throughout. These are transplants from direct sown lettuces in our high tunnel at our neighbors that we teased apart and coddled and soaked for the first few days, and now it seems like they're developing new roots and getting nicely established. And then there's a little bit of extra space, not much, but we're taking advantage of it, where right at the boundary between the lettuces and the pathway is now sown to beets. We'll thin these a bit as we go, but they're all through here, growing along down the line, and we'll enjoy those as another crop. It's a pretty packed bed, but yet we've got a vertical element, and the way back, Sasha planted in peas. And we had to build this structure in order to keep the dogs out from this space. They're a bit too wild for back in here. And so now that we have this physical infrastructure, it was going to be bamboo, but we transferred over to the metal wire and a little bit of a weave on top. And it's a great opportunity to have a climbing crop. So peas are on their way up. And heck, if we're going to do any kind of climbing crop, might as well do some perennial ones too. Caucasian mountain spinach, or Hablitzia, is associated with every pole. So they'll eventually fill out as the main vining crop for this bed. So it's a lot going on between nursery work, annual crops for us, direct sown root crops to enjoy during the season, and then some climbing elements as well, all in one bed. And I find that pattern to be really functional and really beautiful. Here is sea kale. These are rootlets that we've put in. These will eventually be dug up in the fall for nursery related activities. You can see little ones in here. They grow pretty slowly. So in the meantime, again, we can fill it with some annuals. We've got lettuces in here growing really happily in the partial shade. And we've got some nice cultivar currants that are rooting out and growing, and then the mother sea kale. So when we go to dig these little sea kales in the fall, we might break the roots of the mother plant a little bit, and so more suckers, more new sea kale shoots will come up. We're completely happy with that, and if we know that that's a possibility, we can anticipate it and enjoy it. And this one we can start harvesting these broccolis and enjoying them. This is an incredible spring perennial broccoli analog. A little bit funky and musky, but really nice. And that, as we harvest, will allow more sun to get into a block of Brussels sprouts. We're trying these in a little bit slightly shadier condition so that they can grow slowly and steadily rather than in the full blazing sun. We'll have to see how that works, but it's a very, very long, slow crop. So we've got them in the center of the bed, and I see some room here to scratch up the soil when we know a rain might be coming soon. Get in some cilantro or parsley or some other cuttable herb, maybe some dill or things like that, to be the boundary and the edge for our annual crop in the center. I think it's pretty fun in the middle of the garden to have some wild spaces too. There's some aspects to this section that are tended, but a lot of it is just nice luck that we've worked around. Like, for example, the milkweed here, they showed up a number of years ago. They're definitely very actively starting to spread and occupy more and more space, but they're a beautiful plant. I know there's food parts in there we haven't explored yet, but there are food parts that we can enjoy. And that's this friend here. There's major celandine, which is a pretty neat medicine. I believe it's an antiviral. I don't know exactly, but it's a beautiful plant. I know it's considered invasive and all that kind of stuff, but it lives in here in a really nice way. It's compatible with the lungwort that's down below. It seems to be pretty compatible with the sweet Cicely, which is one of the few characters in this bed that we've facilitated. We've asked sweet Cicely to be here, and a lot of the other characters we did not, but we're fine with them. They're getting along really nicely. And then all throughout, we've got these neat blackcap raspberry root sections that are popping back. We dug a lot of these out in the spring to pot up. You can see here's a nice big one we left. This is a varietal of blackcap raspberry that we call peach cap, that makes a very gorgeous peach colored fruit that's really sweet. This is the mother block just to the north of it, but they tip layer across the pathway throughout the season. And so it's a little bit of a semi-feral berry scenario, but that scene is really compatible with quote-unquote weediness, but we'll just consider this an incredible nectar source for different pollinators and a very solid way to cover the ground. There is no direct sunlight sneaking through, and we're early in the season, so this is a very sheltered space for the soil to deepen and grow. Start to get a little bit more feral, but still functional further along. So here we've got some annual transplants. These are broccoli rapinis that were just set in on the south side of a woody perennial block of black currants and seedling apples and more of those blackcap raspberries. The Turkish rocket, this is a plant that we enjoy the harvest. It's a short window, but it's a nice one. These florets can be cracked low and the side shoots pulled off, and they cook up a little bit like a broccoli rabe and an asparagus. They can be particularly wild, or we'll say aromatic, but really nourishing feeling. So we have them throughout the bed in the center. And then here we've got more annuals on the edges, and then a whole nice block of seedling gummies. This is their second year that they're growing in here. These are seedlings of a varietal called Carmine, which makes extremely large and really nice quality fruit. At least locally, I know we'll have enough of these plants in the fall to offer to folks. It's a little bit slow to get things going sometimes with the nursery. These went in last spring in 2022, and by fall of 2023, spring of 2024, they'll be a size that I feel really good about handing off to folks. And there's this interesting, maybe folks can help key this out. This is a brassica of some sort. It looks like a cress, maybe an upland cress that was growing here. Whoa, that seems to shoot their seeds. I don't know if you're seeing that. They're popping all over the place. Anyway, it's a unique plant, and even though the gumi bed is high value, I like the idea of letting this sow in and see who they actually are. So if anyone has ideas of, is it upland cress? Let me know. I'd love to hear. If it's some sort of wacky weed that just shoots seeds everywhere, that's cool. The gumi will be big enough that it shouldn't be an issue. It's fun to see how readily sea kale can return from root fragments. This was a bed that we dug up a lot of plants last year, and I thought I had gone a little too hard and took most, if not all, of the plant material out, and yet any root fragment that was in there, because that was a single disturbance moment and we laid off of it after that. It looks as though lots and lots of rootlets are coming back in a nice way. It's gonna be a beautiful scene to see gumi seedlings mixed with sea kale until the fall, and then we'll have to go through and dig the gumi out, and I figure that's when we can dig some sea kale again and hope that they actually resprout even more. It's neat, some of these perennial vegetables, almost to a fault, resist leaving a bed. They tend to multiply instead of disappear. The bulk of the backyard garden is getting set in motion for what this season's work will be, but there's still some beds that are in transition. Some areas that were particularly weedy that I didn't want to have to go through and hand weed everything. We just put temporarily crates of future nursery stock over those areas, basically block the growth to some extent of the plants that were there with some nursery work. Here we've got some cuttings of seaberry that we got from our friend Buzz Fervor, with a little slug monitoring the top of that stem. Most of the time it's like, ew, slug, pinch them, but they're nice and there's enough cuttings. We can just let them be for now. But those are rooting in their little cells. We'll transplant them out later on. Likewise with these little cuttings of tarragon. And then here we've got a sea of salad greens. We're waiting for them to develop a bunch and then wait for maybe a few days in a row of rain, and we'll transplant those out. So we've got successional sowing. But these will sit here leaching juices and niceness and suppressing the weeds below, holding down the weeds that would otherwise be in the way of this young asparagus. It's not aesthetically the nicest thing in the world, but these are old reclaimed plastic containers that we found in the waste stream, and they're getting a little bit more life and doing some work to hold down the fort while we wait for these other plants to die away. And then once we're ready to plant these out, we can move them away and either direct sow, or better yet, transplant in a summer plug of maybe like a pepper or a tomato, put in some fast growing seeds like okra or zucchini, and see if we can reclaim the bed underneath these. That same trick is happening with our nursery plants. So here we've got some potted up plants for, we're doing a plant sale next Friday. Well, I'll put a link in the description. It's at the Ithaca Farmers Market. It's the Ithaca plant sale, and we'll be bringing down a bunch of leftover lovely plants that we have. Elderberries and Nanking cherries, some sea berries, some gumi, some apricots and other fun plants. And while we're waiting for that sale, we have the pots sitting in the garden again on weedy patches. Boom, we'll suppress the weeds for now. We have to water these. It's going to protect the soil below, really leach out a lot of nice juices, and then when they move, we'll act that same day in getting it translated over to another crop. So all through here, they're helping to pin down the weeds, and then we'll grow some vining crops up the fence line if we can catch that moment perfectly and get the plastic out of here. It's not my favorite to be walking around the garden and seeing plastic, but when I understand the role it can play in getting things prepped for the season, I'm all right with it. I'm not saying I'm thrilled with it, but I'm all right with it. I don't have the time this morning to go really deep into it, but we've refined our watering system that now this is all rainwater that's been collected off of the roof of our neighbor's barn with a little float valve, so that stays full. I've talked about that a little bit in other videos. And if I go upslope, we can see that this is the larger tank. It's the first stopping point for that water, and this one gets filled up from there, and then it goes all the way up. There's a fork in a water line. One of the stems can go into that high tunnel, and we can water with just shy of 2,000 gallons of collected rainwater with gravity pressure. The tanks are actually up there. I'll save it for another video, but it's neat to have a system now where we can water as much as we'd like, which is a lot when it's early in the season and we've got lots of flats of plants that are waking up and lots of transplanting that we're doing. And to have this passively refill with a gravity-fed system is just, it feels lovely. And so far the water is looking really clean and really fresh, and the plants do not mind. I'm hearing the chickens bickering amongst themselves, waiting to be let out. I need to dump some soaked grain for them today. But I thought it'd be nice in the early morning to just share a little mini update of what's happening in this garden. Lots and lots happening. Let me know if there's some interest in more specifics, or if you've got questions about how we're doing some of this bed design and layout. We're just figuring it out as we go along, but it's pretty functional. It feels pretty good overall. There's definitely some areas we'd like to get a little bit more productive and dialed in, but overall the garden itself feels like it's starting out a good, healthy start. Anyway, thanks for watching, and let me know what you'd like to see more of. We'll try to get back into the swing of things soon enough, but for now, time to let the chickens out and get the day started. Take care.